Joining me now is Sheila Subramanian. She's the vice president and co-founder of Future Forum, and Sasha Thompson. She's the CEO and founder of the Equity Equation. Very thrilled to have both you ladies with me. Sheila, I want to start with you. This is going to either be a rude awakening to workers forced to return to the office, or it could be a revolution by workers who refuse and are, quite frankly, instituting their own rules around what will happen in workforce development. What do you anticipate?
Yes, so this is the third Labor Day where employers have set these lines in the sand that employees need to go back into the office full time. And dare I say it, I'd say the score is right now 3-0 in favor of employees. What we're seeing from our data at Future Forum is that only 1 in 5 knowledge workers want to go back into the office full time. And that's actually the lowest it's been since we started surveying over 2 years ago. So the executives I work with, the ones that are the most successful, are the ones who set the principles, the guardrails in terms of what they want to see in their culture. But then they move out of the way and they figure out what works best for specific teams. They empower their leaders and their managers to determine the type of work that they're doing, and ultimately the number of days people are coming back into the office, as well as how to give them more choice. What we need to realize is that work is not one size fits all. And leaders need to realize that as they're implementing their policies when it comes to return to office.
So, Sasha, I'm curious your thoughts here, because I'm a fan of being in the office. I do think there are some jobs that can, be fine working from home. But I do wonder if some people are saying, no, I want to be in the office. And they say, well, you come in 3 days a week. But someone else is like, well, I'm going to be there 5 days a week. How does that work when it comes to workforce development, when it comes to promotions? As the person who chooses to come in there or has the privilege to come in every day, will they be favored? You consider gas prices, childcare, who that disproportionately impacts. We have a lot of questions to figure out as we shift our way of thinking around work.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are some of the things that people managers are struggling with right now, because now they're dealing with proximity bias, right? The folks that are in the office are having more face time. But then what they're also noticing is some of those people managers aren't in the office as well either. And so it's this challenge of how do we ensure inclusion as a part of this when we're talking about hybrid workplaces? How are we looking at this when we're talking about promotions or opportunities to grow and expand in professional development? This is a new landscape. And as Sheila said, this is the third year, so at this point, organizations should have had come up with a plan, right? And so what we're also seeing too is we've opened Pandora's box. We can't go back to where we were pre-pandemic. We're in this post-pandemic place where people want to not just survive in the workplace, they want to thrive. And so organizations have to figure out how to make that happen.
Sheila, I think some of this is generational as well, because I know I go back and forth between, these young kids are so privileged and, they want to do yoga at 3 PM and, don't talk to me about work-life balance when you're 22. But then on the other side of it, I think, these young people are showing us a different way, because it's not about, I take no pleasure in saying, I work 18 hours a day. People are looking at you like, who does, you want to medal for that? Like, that's not necessarily a good thing. So I wonder how much of this is generational, particularly when you think of CEOs and the people in power making these decisions. They are not Gen Zers, and more than likely, they're probably not millennials either.
Yes. So a lot of the conversation right now is about generations and the tension between executives and Gen Zers. I accept that. That said, I think that there's been a fundamental shift in how people approach work over the past 2 years. I'm a working mom. Rewind back to 2019, I used to talk to fellow parents about how our lives were going to fit into our work, how we were going to achieve that elusive work-life balance. And now, fast forward to 2022, the conversation so much more is about how is work going to fit into my life? And our jobs are no longer the center of our identity. So when we think about terms like quiet quitting or the Great Resignation, I encourage leaders to dismiss the notion that employees who sacrifice their health or time with their family or even contributions to the community are the marker of a good employee. Rather, they need to focus on the outcomes, the results, the value that their employees are driving, rather than their tendency to always be on and always responsive to the needs of their employer.
But then you also think about, Sasha, like, what does this mean for people who work downtown? If you work at the coffee shop downtown, you work at restaurants downtown, you know, in these bumbling business areas, because it casts really a dark shadow over some of their economic prospects. I know when I'm traveling, hotel workers always tell me, you know, we're struggling. People who work in the service industry, you know, servers, they're struggling because people are not back yet. So this really is not just a workforce and workforce development shift. It's an economic shift in how we look at. I remember after the gig economy, that was a shift. And now here we are again.
Yeah, you know, this is really part of what I'm calling the big pivot, right? It's companies need to figure out how can we monetize what's in front of us right now. One of the things that came up during the pandemic where a lot of restaurants were starting to do delivery, right? Many of them are still doing that. And so how do you continue to pivot? How do you start to meet your customers where they are? And so what we'll probably see is some organizations or some companies either shifting or going out of business, unfortunately, because they're not able to make that shift and that change. So for organizations or for companies that are kind of downtown or in the hub where people were working and they were making their money, they may need to look at other options. They may need to move to different locations. But again, those are the conversations that need to happen right now, because if they haven't been happening, they're kind of missing the boat.